Good morning. I'm Al McFarland, and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Northside Urban Coalition. Thanks to all of our friends at the North Minneapolis Coalition of Agencies and Organizations that are here today. We want to today talk about an important message, and our main presentation today will be from Bethlehem Yahala Wark. I'm trying to, she's smiling, so maybe I'm saying it properly. And she's a program specialist at North Point Health and Wellness Center. She's here to talk about youth vaping and substance abuse. We're also joined today by Kirsten Anderson, who's the Regional Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs Prevention Coordinator, and she's going to give an update on the menthol cigarette ban. Before I start, let me acknowledge that our leader, Diana Hawkins, is not available today, but her colleague, Andrew Bornhoff, is here. Andrew, good morning, and Dee Phillips is here. Also, Clarence Jones is here. Bill Magnuson from our colleagues at the police department here as well. Others will be joining. Andrew, any comments before we begin? Any thoughts or impressions?
No, I guess for everyone, Diana is not here because she had another death in her family. Her aunt passed away, so she's attending that today. So just keep her in your thoughts and prayers as she goes through that. She's had a little bit too much sadness in her family in recent months, so we'll just hold her up. But I'm glad that we all can still get together and have this meeting. And I know she was, and I'm very excited to talk about this topic. So thank you, Al, again, once hosting.
Well, great, thank you. And what we do is have our major presentations, and then we open up for questions, and we thank our presenters. We thank those who are listening either at our YouTube, Inside News YouTube, or at the Hawthorne Facebook or Inside News Facebook channels. Surprise, today, as of this week, we've also added a connection to the Black Press of America. And even though this conversation is local, we know that the topic is global. The issues concern people everywhere in the country. So we're pleased that this program, I believe, is being simultaneous. The Black Press of America, through our national organization, National Newspaper Publishers Association, and is available through them at Black Press USA NNPA. So we are pleased to have the opportunity to expand this conversation. So let me begin. Again, our theme today is talking about vaping, the presence, the impact of vaping, what it means, what we should be aware of, and then following up a conversation with Kirsten on the menthol cigarette ban. There's news that we should be aware of in that arena. Yahala Wark, good morning, and thank you for being here.
Having me, and I'm actually surprised that you pronounced my last name correctly. So kudos for that. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let me make sure I do this correctly. Okay. Sorry. There's like this thing blocking the. Great. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Bethlehem Yahala Wark, and I work at North Point Health and Wellness Center in the Health Policy and Advocacy Department. And a lot of our work is primarily focused on tobacco prevention and offering cessation services, or referring people to cessation services and outreach on education around flavors and vaping and tobacco. So let's go ahead and just get started. Okay, I'm just gonna jump into Minnesota youth tobacco use here. So this graph is actually from the Minnesota Department of Health, Teens and Tobacco in Minnesota survey in 2017. And this was the first time that youth tobacco use increased during that survey in 17 years. And we saw a huge spike in e-cigarette use among youth during that time. So I'll show you this graph here, which kind of shows that all of the other tobacco use decreased throughout those years and in 2017 as well. But you see that huge spike in e-cigarette use. And although that this data is from 2017, youth vaping remains at epidemic levels. The 2019 Minnesota student survey found that combustible cigarette use fell to the lowest levels ever recorded, which is a huge public health achievement. But however, e-cigarette use continues to rise, and students now use e-cigarettes at 5 times the rate of conventional cigarettes. And an estimated 3.6 million young Americans use e-cigarettes. So it's a huge concern for all of us in public health. I also just wanted to share the evolution of e-cigarettes. I think this illustrates. You see that in the beginning. So e-cigarettes were invented by a pharmacist in China who kind of just wanted to have an alternative to combustible cigarettes. And they've been on the market since 2007 and have gone through many stages and styles, as you can see here. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my printer is printing. I'm assuming someone's printing something. So sorry if you can hear that. But yeah, so earlier in the years, e-cigarettes kind of resembled more of a cigarette, and they were disposable, so they were called e-cig-alikes. And as the years progressed, they kind of turned into these pod mods, which you guys might have seen. So they're bigger, and they offer the user to kind of modify their experience, so they could make these huge vape clouds and like have whatever type of flavors they want in their e-cigarettes. And then now we're starting to see these smaller, sleeker, cooler looking designs that are the ones that are really popular among youth. So the tobacco industry spends a lot of money in Minnesota alone marketing their products. And we know that the vaping industries are just using the same playbook that the tobacco industries used decades ago to market their products to youth. And that's because they're constantly looking for replacers to replace smokers who died of diseases related to tobacco use. And we know that the tobacco industry uses cheap prices, appealing flavors, and targeted advertising to attract youth as well. So here's just an illustration of a few of the fun and cool looking flavors of e-juice. So you see here, there's like Fanta flavored e-juice, watermelon, cotton candy. And then on the bottom corner here is the cigars. So like small, cheap cigars that are also flavored and come in a bunch of fun flavors and cool looking packaging as well, like colorful packaging. So you could see how youth would really appealed to these products and the flavors. Here's an old advertisement from Juul, which was a really popular e-cigarette among youth. And just to note, one Juul pod has the equivalent level of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So huge nicotine hit when you're using these products. And you can see here that Juul's using colorful advertising, displaying all of their flavors, using like young fun models to kind of bring in that attraction. And here's another e-juice example, and this is from a vaping Instagram page. And so you can see again how this product would be really appealing to youth with the packaging and the names of the flavors too. So here's a little data from the CDC that 7 out of 10 middle and high school students who currently use tobacco have used a flavored product. That majority of these youth are using flavored tobacco products, and that's mainly because of the marketing and because of the appeal that comes with the packaging and the types of flavors that are available to them. And here are just a few quotes from tobacco executives. And you can see here just the way that they are planning on marketing their products to attract youth. Like for younger people, beginning cigarette smokers, teenagers, when you feel like a light smoke, want to be reminded of bubblegum. So they're taking that and putting it in their marketing and in their products and attracting you to these deadly products and getting them hooked. So here's another really upsetting quote from R.J. Reynolds, executive. And again, just another example of how the tobacco industry was planning on marketing and target marketing their products. So I know Kirsten's going to be talking about menthol, and the FDA just recently is taking steps to ban menthol, and that's mainly because the tobacco industry has for many decades targeted the Black community and other marginalized communities specifically with menthol tobacco products. And menthol cigarettes are a concern because they're so easy to start up because of that cooling effect that you get from smoking menthol. So it's easy to start up and super hard to quit. And we see that Black people disproportionately are affected by disease and death that comes from tobacco use. So we're happy to see that the FDA is finally taking some steps forward to remove these products from the market. And here are just a couple of examples of what that marketing looks like. In magazines, you would see fun, young, like Black people with a Newport magazine, and then, or not a Newport magazine, but in magazines, advertising for Newport. And there's another example here, take pride in your flavor. So that's marketed to the LGBTQ communities. Okay, so who has passed a restriction on flavored tobacco? So a lot of our work too is focused on policy, and we primarily focus on point of sale policy work, both within cities and statewide. So here are just a few of the cities that have prohibited the sale of fruit and candy flavored tobacco products, excluding menthol, and they are only sold in adult tobacco shops. And then here's another list of a few cities and even counties that have prohibited the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including menthol, to adult-only shops. And here's a list of cities that have completely banned the sale of all flavored tobacco products from their city, which is huge. Going here. So just in summary, we know that starting smoking is the best way to create a tobacco-free generation. And we're so happy to see that local communities have the opportunity to take on these policies and have been pushing for raising the tobacco sales age has been raised in Minnesota now to 21, but continuing to restrict and prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products, because just getting those products away from youth would probably be the best way to avoid them from ever starting to smoke and getting hooked on these vapes. And that's all I have for you guys.
Great presentation. Thank you, Bethlehem. You know, I've got a bunch of questions and am pleased to engage you to sort of explore and explain more deeply some of the issues you brought up. Thank you so much for the work you're doing and for the presentation you made. Question number one is to do with the availability of resources to communicate the dangers and the challenges and the impact on vaping to the public in general, to young people in general, but to Black youth in particular. Can you give us an idea of how much Minnesota has marshaled to fight the problem in terms of marketing outreach, and then how much of that is targeted at Black teens or young people?
Absolutely. So at North Point, actually, we do focus a lot of our outreach to North Minneapolis and going into schools and doing presentations of pre-COVID to kind of, connect with the youth there and educate them on the dangers and the harms of vaping and cigarette use. But I know that we're a part of a larger coalition, the Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generation. So there are a lot of other organizations within that coalition that do similar outreach to schools, educational outreach to adults even, just letting parents know, hey, these are the signs to look out for, because they're super easy to hide, these vapes. I mean, there are kids smoking in bathrooms at schools. That was a huge issue at one point. And parents didn't know. And they had no idea what a vape even looked like because they look like little USB
drives.
Sticks, Yeah. So a lot of our work is focused on outreach and doing presentations and educational outreach to youth and adults too.
Does vaping have the same characteristic smell of tobacco that tobacco has or not?
No, not at all. It's like, it depends on the flavor that's being smoked at the time, but it usually just leaves a scent.
Mm-hmm.
But it disappears really quickly too. So it might linger for a little while, but it just goes away.
But it's not the automatic telltale scent of tobacco, right? When a kid or person walks in who's been smoking, you know it. And,
right.
And this instead, the smell might be a fragrance that might not be offensive. Mm-hmm. And you might not know. I've walked and see people in cars and massive volumes of smoke, more than the cigarette smoke would appear. But I think you walk by and look closely, and what they're doing is smoking vaping, and so that must be a difference as well. There's a massive volume of smoke. Yes. Talk about that if you would.
Yeah. So if you guys remember the photo that I showed, so that middle photo of the huge pod mod is the one that generates a lot of smoke, a lot of like the vapor clouds. That's what most people use if they want to get that huge effect. But there are other e-cigs now on the market that you can kind of modify the heat. I'm assuming is just the heat that comes from the vape to make these huge clouds. And I mean, those clouds, like the vape clouds themselves, are not safe to be inhaled as secondhand smoke either. And I think that's the thing that we want to kind of communicate to communities and to youth, is that these products are not safe, that we don't know the long-lasting health consequences that come from inhaling secondhand vape smoke or smoking, e-juice, because the chemicals that are in e-juice are not safe to be inhaled either. So.
Are these instruments actually generating fire like tobacco? I have no idea if this is some kind of electronic without fire or electronic that causes a fire that ignites something. What's the chemistry in vaping?
Okay, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. So it's not fire. There's like a coil that's being heated. So you press the button, the coil is being heated, and that's what heats up the liquid in the cartridge usually. And that's when what you're inhaling. So you're inhaling the aerosol that comes from the vape. Pretty sure. Yeah. Yes. So it's completely different from combustible cigarettes. There's no fire. There's no anything like that.
And tell me if I'm wrong here. The impact of tobacco is the carcinogenic delivery from the combustion of tobacco into the body, and therefore the potential for cancer. But the same product, the same consequence can exist with vaping. Is that correct or not correct?
Yeah, there are cancer-causing chemicals that are in vape juice, and just the operation of the heating up of the metals that are in the vape itself causes you to inhale like nickel and iron and those types of things because of that metal that's in the vape. So yeah, you are inhaling dangerous chemicals when you're vaping.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Thank you. This is interesting, and I'm really appreciative of both your knowledge and the opportunity to learn from you about this important issue.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Bethlehem, is there any signs that this is like a fad, that something's going to follow up with this, or like that your graph showed tobacco smoking was going down and now we're back up with vaping?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to see that pattern again until the next thing, or what's kind of predicted?
So we are just like keeping track of what new products are out there and more popular among youth. And it kind of looks like it's about the same now, just those smaller, sleeker e-cigarettes that I showed in one of the slides. But the industry they did come out with a newer product that they thought would be really popular among youth. I can't remember the name of it, but so they are looking for new ways to attract youth and new products to bring out. But we're hoping that with policies to, remove and restrict flavors and increasing the tobacco sales age to 21, that youth just say, oh, well, like, we don't want to use this anymore. And that kind of just goes away as these policies continue to get passed.
So does funding to carry this information campaign to the community come from the historic settlement between the state and the tobacco industry, 20 years ago now? Is that the principal source of funding, or are there different methods for funding this prevention and awareness campaign work?
Yeah, so Clearway, Minnesota is actually one of our biggest funders. They the organization was created after that settlement with the settlement money, but they are set to sunset this summer. So by the end of the year, Clearway will not be here anymore. But we are doing a lot of work, and they're doing a lot of work at the state level to secure funding for tobacco prevention and cessation services. That will then, I think, be handled by MDH primarily. But we also get funding from Blue Cross Blue Shield Center for Prevention to do a lot of this work too.
Bethlehem, let me close your part by asking you to share with us your background, your training and knowledge, how you come to the expertise that you've presented and to the position that you have at North Point.
Yeah, sure. So I actually graduated years now, and I'm now getting my master's in public health. So hopefully just to continue on this path of outreach and advocacy and health policy.
Well, congratulations on your continued success as a person moving your professional career and your educational attainment. And kudos to North Point for grabbing you and bringing your energy and enthusiasm to the support of the community. I always say that North Point is like the center of health for our community, North Minneapolis, and they do such a tremendous job in every aspect of the service they deliver, the education they provide, and the partnerships they create that enable us to step into a position of equity and ownership of our health and our future. I say that, and North Point reflects this idea that our health is our business, and North Point gives meaning to that saying. Let me switch now to Kirsten Anderson. Kirsten, thank you for being here as well. And the question of menthol has been in the news lately. And you're going to give us an update and a background on what considerations are at the present time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, or good morning still.
Good morning still, that's right, that's right.
I am not totally prepared. Andrew asked me about this 5 minutes before I got on, but I would like to share a stat that is pretty shocking. that 85% of Black smokers smoke menthol cigarettes compared to just 29% of white smokers. So the ban that the FDA announced yesterday is a huge win for Black Americans and Black Minnesotans. And it was 5 years in the making. They literally waited until the last day to make their decision. But that's probably a good thing, because if it would have been made 4 years prior, it probably wouldn't have been as celebratory. So the FDA did ban the sale of all menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars. And that is just the first step. It's going to take probably years to put that into place. But creating that first step is a huge win for public health and racial equity in America.
So explain the background, go into more, I mean, why this issue, what do we know about Black people in menthol and Black people in tobacco in general, and what are the pros and cons? This is a hotly debated issue. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but I watched Trevor Noah last night on his regular show, and he had a skit with Roy Wood Jr., I believe, about the just announced ban on menthol. And they obviously took the contrarian viewpoint, saying that this was one more attack on the rights of Black people to make their own minds up. That was what they said. And they also said that what their response to the potential impact of the ban was to go out and hoard the cigarettes, the inventory that is in the market right now, to buy it all and wait till the shortage appears and make a killing selling the contraband. And so that's kind of funny, but it's not funny. So talk about the landscape and the argument that's been afoot for a long time.
I did hear the negative side to that yesterday, and I hear what they're saying, and that goes back to a different, bigger issue that we need law enforcement reform. And the way Big Tobacco has target marketed to the Black community specifically has created this inequity. So this step will help address that inequity in creating healthier lives and less Black people addicted to cigarettes to begin with. So it's really looking at an upstream approach and the prevention side of it. But I do see where they're coming from with more interactions with law enforcement and that side of it, yeah.
So the danger, and this is me stretching a little bit, the danger of banning, and I'll switch products, is parallel to the danger of how the society has moved from the absolute ban of marijuana to step by step moving to decriminalize, and now in many cities and states approve recreational, medical first, then recreational marijuana. In fact, on the table at our state is a discussion about both decriminalization and approval of recreational use of marijuana. So the dilemma is this. Black people were not only users, as were many others, but more heavily policed with their use of marijuana, right? And the same is true with opioid use, because in the story of opioid use, the common knowledge, because of what I believe now is propagandistic disinformation, the image Americans held of opioid users, read that heroin users, was a Black junkie, a Black guy somewhere knotted out, shooting up heroin or cocaine use, etc. Over time, we know that opioid addiction now is being characterized as a suburban housewives disease, or the methamphetamine, opioid type use, truck drivers, rural white people, and working class white people. And as the apparent explosion of the consumption of these illegal substances just continued, the will and perception of whether these ought to be treated as crimes has shifted, and we're not seeing the users and or victims of these pandemics as criminals now, but as people with a health problem. So we're shifting it from the criminal sector to the health sector. Good thing, which is where it should have been in the first place. But as a consequence of policy in the past, a lot of Black people are in jail, in prison for long times, around marijuana use and around cocaine use, et cetera. So now here comes menthol cigarettes. And I'm waving the flag. Does it mean that a person gets his or her Salem cigarettes or Newport cigarettes, but not Lucky Strikes and not Marlboro, and puts himself at risk for violating the law, and therefore another way to experience the disparate treatment in the legal justice system? Are you hearing that at all? Am I way off basis? Am I being ultra paranoid in raising this question? What do you think, Kirsten?
No, I definitely hear you. And I think that is a part of the bigger picture with the police reform that is desperately needed in our country and state and cities.
Mm-hmm.
Al, maybe Clarence. I saw Clarence was on, and I think
He is. Yeah,
he might have Clarence. If you're willing to jump in and maybe say something. Oftentimes at Hawthorne, when we've talked about smoking or opioids, it's in the vein of dealing with trauma, right? And so when we're taking menthol cigarettes away from someone, maybe we're taking their relatively healthy, not healthy, but less destructive form of dealing with trauma than maybe something stronger than opioids. And so maybe Clarence, can you talk about what could be done to then, if we're banning menthols and that's how someone's been dealing with their trauma, what can be positively done to help them? I'm not sure if Clarence is able to.
Yeah, I hear you. And Al, I heard my name, and so I was doing something in the meantime, and I understand. What's the question again?
Well, I laid out a scenario about with the ban of menthol products. Sure. Does that make us look back at how the society looked at opioid use? And I say that in history, opioid was equivalent to Black men and Black women strung out on heroin. That was the picture, right? But now we know that both heroin and methamphetamine are classified as suburban housewife or truck driver or poor white, afflictions. And now they're being looked at as health issues, not as criminal issues. And so as the country looks at transitioning its viewpoint about marijuana from decriminalizing it to looking at the benefits of medical marijuana to finally step by step moving towards recreational marijuana, you have the history of young Black people, not so young, but Black people in jail because of marijuana law violations. And so as those things become legalized or looked at as health issues, not crime issues, but now we begin to add with a ban the question of menthol. Does that risk becoming a criminal issue that creates a pathway for the further incarceration or what some would say suppression, reason to micromanage Black people? So that was the general question. And any thoughts on that?
I appreciate how you set that up, because it appears that, we are criminalized for things other people get a pass on. And I just believe that we have to be mindful. I'm not saying that because we have such a long history of how people have twisted this around and changed it from a a criminal piece to a medical piece. We have to be very mindful, I think, of how we watch this particular issue so that it doesn't become a criminalized thing for us again. And so we have a history, to me, we have a history of how people have utilized things that we were penalized for to make money. And so I guess the key piece for me out of all of this is that we have to be really mindful, because we have watched the history of how the narrative has changed in order to hinder our communities. So that would be my take. We have to watch now, because we know enough now about how people have twisted the narrative for us to be aware of how we need to protect our people so that we don't go back to jail.
So one of the things then, Clarence, and a guest that we know, Kirsten and Bethlehem, that the industry used massive and effective advertising. They had specific techniques and messages for targeting African Americans, Black people, and they were effective. And the data show the effectiveness of that strategy, the strategies they used, particularly to develop this relationship with menthol with Black people. So for me, the question is, I'm in agreement. First of all, let me say that I'm in agreement with the ban. I think it's a good idea and I'm in agreement with doing all we can to prevent the proliferation of vaping. So as a matter of principle, I'm in agreement that these are critical issues that we have to deal with, because both of them have a profound negative impact on the health of individuals, and they have major cost to the community that could be avoided if people didn't go down those pathways, right? So having said that, then what are the strategies that respect people's right to make decisions on the one hand, but also educate people so that they have the capacity, the knowledge, and the expectation to make the right decision? And I raised questions with you, Bethlehem, about the funding source and how our society has used resources, particularly those from the settlement, and have we invested in public education and in prevention in the Black community the way we have in the general community, or have we targeted that investment in a way that is parallel and that meets the targeting of the industry to our community? I suggest we have not. I suggest that the state and the Clearway organization thought broadly about all of Minnesota and talked to all of Minnesota, but did not, in a way that was commensurate, target prevention education to the communities at the rate or commensurate with the impact those neighborhoods or communities experience. I could be wrong. And in fact, this conversation will cause me to assign somebody to go do the research and to write the story. Hopefully I am wrong, but I think I'm not. But I totally could be. So that's what I'm saying. How do we ensure that our strategies are based on awareness, knowledge, and how do we use systems and vehicles in our community to carry that message forward? This is a self-interested conversation. Let me disclose that too. I'm in the communications business. It's what I do for a living. That's how I make my money, is by marketing, information, communications. And my desire as a communicator is that agencies, organizations, businesses engage the platforms that I have to bring the information forward that impacts our community, that can engage our people around good decision making. So that's my disclosure, number one. I have an interest in supporting the decisions that you've come to. And I want to ensure that interested parties engage on a business-like basis the information infrastructure in the Black community and in other communities of color, because not only is it providing a health message, a new narrative around health, but it's also acknowledging and enabling, growing the communicating power inside our culture and community. So I'm throwing it out there. It's not a question, it's a comment, but I'm interested in feedback.
Yeah.
And Bethany, you're smiling. You go first. Okay.
I have so much to say. No, but I think you did raise some really good points in everything that you just said. But I do want to mention that with the FDA just announcing this yesterday, it is going to take a few years for this whole thing to roll out. So what we did with T21 when we increased the tobacco purchase age to 21 in Minnesota and in local communities, we wanted to remove PUP penalties, which is possession, use, and purchase. So all of the penalties or whatever is focused on the seller, not the user. And that was to avoid any policing towards youth, which was really important for our coalition and for our organizations. So we're hoping that a similar type of thing will be included with the menthol bans as well. And I do also just want to mention that the FDA removed flavored cigarettes from the market many years ago, but they exempt menthol during that removal. And it was mainly because of the way that the industry markets and sells menthol cigarettes. So we want to include menthol in that existing flavored tobacco or flavored cigarette ban. But I do want to also mention that we have a Minnesota Menthol Coalition, and that coalition is, it consists of community, like a diverse, group of community leaders, organizations in Minnesota that are supportive of menthol bans, menthol restrictions in Minnesota and local communities as well. So Clearway and Blue Cross are working on diversifying, and they have diversified their outreach and their targeting for educational outreach with their grantees and organizations that they partner with. So we have seen that, but I do understand, I completely understand where you're coming from. And that's why a lot of the work that Latricia and I do at North Point, we want to focus on our community and how we can support our community throughout whatever policies that we're working on or we're interested in working on, and how we can educate them and what resources we can provide to, just like not passing things without their support or approval. So it's not like a blind side of, hey, we're just going to take your cigarettes away from you. We don't want menthol to be a Black thing, because it shouldn't be a Black thing, right? We want our community to be healthy, and we don't want to leave our Black people behind when we're passing policies related to tobacco. So I think that's why there's such a big push on menthol, and just the impact that it's had in the Black community for so long. It has such a strong, it has a strong meaning to us to like kind of separate the two and not mesh that as, oh, this is a right for Black people to smoke menthol cigarettes. We don't want that to be a thing anymore. We want to separate the two. So I hope that kind of clears up.
That's a great response. Bill Magnuson had a question or comment. Bill, please jump in here.
Yeah, just a few comments, Mr. McFarland. So I think it was in 2017, Minneapolis banned the sale of menthol cigarettes throughout the city. And it's not so much a criminal issue as it is a licensing issue. So the penalty falls, like she was saying, on the seller. And that's what Minneapolis does, is that if there's a complaint that a store, convenience store, whatever, is selling menthol cigarettes, then business licensing will investigate that and then penalize the person that is selling them and not the purchaser. So that's how that's worked in Minneapolis. And then also just a comment that I just saw yesterday, I think it was, that the city of Bloomington by 2022 will not license any cigarette sales in the city of Bloomington.
Okay, so that's a movement. So I didn't know, Bill, that I kind of knew but didn't remember that menthol cigarettes are not available locally. Is that what you're saying? That you cannot buy menthol cigarettes in Minneapolis by ordinance?
No, you can't by ordinance. So it was 2017, the city council passed it, and it was considered, a little bit of a racist issue because it was who it was going to affect, and then also the community up here and some of the store owners up here in this area too. That is probably affected by it the most, but it isn't a criminal issue as opposed to where you go out there, if you buy menthol cigarettes, you're going to get criminalized. It's more of a licensing issue with the store that's selling them. They're the ones that get penalized.
Smoke shops can still sell them, but not grocery stores and gas stations and things like that.
Yep, yeah. Smoke shops still sell them. So I think that Winter Gas especially has that Adams Tobacco Shop. I think they're able to sell them. And then, but another thing that was considered that people didn't think of is that, you have Robbinsdale, which isn't that far from here, and Golden Valley and Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park, that you can go there and still buy them too, probably.
Just like liquor sales on Sunday, people used to create a car train to Wisconsin, right?
Yep.
When you couldn't buy booze in Minnesota, that was the Sunday route. Or whatever. I'll say one more thing, kind of smiling. I used to smoke, don't smoke, haven't for a long time, and had no idea of what cigarettes cost. And somebody told me that they are ghastly expensive. I mean, it's a huge drain on your personal finances, And so there's every reason in the world to try to help and support people shifting that investment into more life-sustaining and giving, and uses in their family and personal budgets as well. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? This is a good conversation. I'm so glad to have it with you all. Any other questions? Dee, any thoughts, or Clarence, any more comments on this?
I would like to talk about the funding piece.
Sure, please.
They are talking about the next round of tobacco settlement funding that they hadn't paid up yet and how that's going to be allocated. So something you can do is write to your representatives, your local representative, on the support for that funding. And
national or local?
Local.
In Minnesota. Minnesota, okay.
Yep. I can't give you the specific bill number because I can't. But I think advocating for that money for your community is important, and you should be heard.
Okay, great.
And then one other thing for funding that I want to show you is DHS has a mini grant available right now. It is due on Monday, but it is to $25,000 per grantee for providing mental health, substance use disorder prevention, treatment, and crisis-related services to support Black communities in the metro area specifically.
Okay.
So I would suggest for your organizations to apply for that.
Okay.
And then another thing is also Minneapolis also has that ban on menthol already, but just making sure your community partners, like in the schools, are also having comprehensive tobacco policies and making sure they don't have punitive measures in place.
Great.
And then last thing to think about is just going back to the root causes of all this, and mental health issues are normally a key thing in play. So addressing what's going on with mental health and the root causes with the use is really important. That's all I have.
That's a lot. Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative. Andrew, any other comments?
One quick question. We have at Hawthorne a couple relationships with storefront owners, and they're, for them, and they're in a weird place, but they lost a lot of their revenue or are worried about losing even more revenue because of the loss of these sales. It's a weird thing to say, defend somebody who's making money off of the sale of cigarettes, but at the same time, they are part of our local economy and part of our, it's a community of color business owner that is important in many ways to Hawthorne. Has there been outreach from the city or state to help them replace this lost revenue? Does anyone know about that?
I think yes. So I think it was Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis, and maybe even St. Paul when they passed their menthol restriction policy too, offered store owners, it wasn't a grant, but just a way to kind of like sell other products that might help them with their lost revenue because of tobacco. So like offering like fresh fruits and vegetables and other products similar to that to these store owners so that they have those available to them. So there was some assistance from the cities when these policies were passed to help store owners. I wish I had more information on that, but I can't remember. Kirsten, do you know?
I do not know the answer to that question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to thank you, both Kirsten and Bethlehem, for those powerful presentations, excellent presentations. Thank you for making them, and thank you for the work that you do on behalf of our community and our state. And thanks to the members of the Northside Coalition for maintaining interest and educating our neighborhoods and organizations around this important topic. Join us again next month. Andrew, when's the next meeting?
Actually, Diana and I spoke yesterday. We'll probably skip May just because it falls around the Memorial holiday. And it tends to be a time where people are busy with school ending and going on vacation. So look for it in June. Actually, will probably be our next meeting. But again, thank you to our guests, and Al, as always, thank you to you for hosting. We could not do this without you. So really, really grateful for your presence.
Well, it's an important conversation. We're glad to have it, and we'll see you all next time. Okay, take care.